Hey, I'm Adam Dachis, and this is the supercharged review of the Sony a7s. The a7s is an interesting addition to Sony's new line of full-frame cameras. It follows the standard A7 entry-level full-frame camera and the A7R. Just as the R in A7R stands for resolution, as in high resolution, the S in A7s stands for sensitivity. In fact, the a7s puts such a focus on low light sensitivity that there are some serious trade-offs in resolution. The a7s has a 12.2 megapixel low light sensor, which essentially amounts to 4K. That's not great for photos, but this version of the a7 clearly was meant for video recording in as many situations as possible. While the camera can natively record 1080p video to an SD card in a variety of formats, it cannot record 4K without an external device that costs nearly as much as the body of the camera itself. This is unfortunate and a little silly since the camera supports Sony's XAVCS codec for higher bit rates, which it uses in its 4K prosumer camera, the FDR-AX100. That said, the a7s can output both 1080p and 4K uncompressed through the mini HDMI port. That's great if you still have $2,000 left over after buying the a7s and really need that added video quality, though I don't think this includes most people. That said, you're in for another disappointment when it comes to lenses. Sony released 5 relatively expensive full-frame E-mount lenses that work natively with their a7 line. While some have received better reviews than others, the worst of the bunch starts at $500 and you can expect to pay as much as $1,500 for the higher-end glass. Those prices shouldn't come as a surprise for Sony fans and professional photographers alike, but those lenses offer relatively slow apertures for their class. You might think that you can overcome the problem by purchasing standard E-mount lenses, but there's a serious trade-off. Standard E-mount lenses either offer some pretty insane vignetting or require you to crop the sensor significantly. On a camera like the a7R, this crop makes for smaller but still usable images. On a lower resolution camera like the a7s, however, they're just a hair above 1080p. Images that small are virtually unusable, and if you plan to record 4K video with the a7s, you'll barely get anything of value when using a standard E-mount lens. The good news, however, is that you can adapt all sorts of lenses to the a7s without any trouble. Sony's LE-EA4 adapter, which costs about $350, allows the use of Sony A-mount lenses with autofocus capabilities and no need for APS-C sensor cropping. Samyang/Rokinon also provide inexpensive, quality manual focus lenses that work well with this camera. If that's not enough, you can pick up inexpensive adapters for older manual focus lenses like Nikon, and you've got a cheap way of overcoming the annoying APS-C crop factor. None of these solutions are perfect, but it's not like it's an issue we haven't seen before. Nikon and Canon both have this problem, but fortunately for them, they have a large selection of lenses. Sony does not, but hopefully we'll see more from them in the future. But if you're buying this camera, you probably don't care that much about the drawbacks and are more interested in the video and images this camera can produce, notably in low light. The good news is, it's pretty good in that department. The a7s can see in the dark and does so with reasonably low noise levels. At high ISOs, it retains detail better than the Canon 5D Mark III, as evidenced from DP Review's direct tests, as well as my own casual testing. Furthermore, it produces beautiful images with great detail and color even in poor lighting situations. Video quality is pretty much identical to the images the camera captures. It's very clear Sony intended to make a video camera that looks like it was intended for photography. You get a lot of choices with your video too. Although the AVC HD codec provides relatively low bit rates of 24 to 28 megabits per second, XAVC-S nearly doubles it with 50 megabits per second for all 1080p frame rates. Additionally, you can record at 120 frames per second at 720p for some nice slow motion, and can dually record 720p video as reference when creating a higher quality file. While XAVC-S is a marked improvement, the a7s provides just half the bitrate of Canon's 5D Mark III. The codecs are a bit different, so how this actually affects the quality remains to be nitpicked. Besides, if you're buying the a7s for its uncompressed output, this is pretty much irrelevant anyway. The inner workings of the a7s certainly has its drawbacks and advantages, but the exterior of the camera is both beautiful and feels fantastic. I've always liked the builds of Sony's mirrorless cameras, but this is a step above. It looks great, it's hardly much bigger than its mirrorless siblings, and has several intelligently placed buttons and dials. You can set custom functions, make small exposure adjustments, and access manual settings without the need to dive into any menus, most of the time at least. The camera and its lenses are also weatherproof, so a little rain isn't going to kill it. It also features an articulating LCD screen and viewfinder, so you can pretty much see what you're shooting any way you want. Overall, the a7s offers a series of compromises. You can get really great video and images in basically any lighting situation if you're willing to sacrifice resolution. Some people might find this trade-off completely meaningless, and I'm one of those people, but for some, it is not the camera that you might hope for if you're looking for a small package with great video, great images, in low light, and in high res. With Sony, you'll have to sacrifice one of those things. If you can pick one though, they make an A7 model with a compromise of your choice.